welcome you guys. Thank you very much for hanging in there. Hope you had a decent lunch, and thank you for coming on this last afternoon. Really appreciate it. That means a lot to stay through and kind of hear what we're going through. We're going to talk a lot about our journey and where we are in a school district here in Santa Rosa. There's some introductions, but I just kind of, we all, obviously, with the background here at the Conference for School Psychologists, social emotional well-being is a critical piece of what we do and what we look for, and this is still a piece of our recovery. Just reflecting back with my team, we'll introduce everybody. We're still talking about this, even as we've lived it for the last 3 months. It is such a process to go through, and we are still reflecting back with each other, and I think that's one of the key takeaways you'll see is that this trauma takes time, as you guys all know. It's important to have people you can talk to, and that's going to be one of the takeaways we think you'll come from this, is that you have to develop the systems where you can talk and reflect, and everyone has their own timeline on when they are coming back up from the trauma, and how high and resilient they will be depends on a lot of what you all can do in their recovery. So it's just an important little reflection amongst us. So with that, we are from Santa Rosa Schools. My name is Steve Mazzara. I am one of the assistant superintendents. My role is what we call Student and Family Services, so I have one of the hats I wear is a special education hat as well. I also wear attendance and discipline and a couple things like that. And my role in this recovery was to work on the plan to bring kids back. I'll talk later about how we kind of divided up our worlds. And so my chunk of the world was to develop the recovery plan for staff and students. And that's one of the pieces that we'll break into. We have Mr. Ed Navarro. You may introduce yourself.
I am Ed Navarro, principal at Rincon Valley Middle School and Santa Rosa Accelerated Charters, 2 of the schools that were heavily impacted by the fires.
Robin Wilkins, I'm a school counselor at Rincon Valley Middle School and also Santa Rosa Accelerated Charters.
Okay, great.
I'm Brianna Seeley-Clark. I'm a restorative specialist at Santa Rosa Middle School and French American Charter, also working for the district, so I move around within the district.
Next here, Angela.
I'm Angela Bonner, school psychologist at Pioneer High School, and I also have a couple classes of severe and handicapped population at another high school and lead school psychologists.
Linda.
And I'm Matt Parker. I'm a school psychologist at Hidden Valley Elementary, another one of the schools that was heavily impacted, as well as running a counseling and education program at Montgomery High School, and I'm also one of the lead school psychologists for our district.
So we'll do some things to kind of frame where we are in our roles and things, and without doing personal invitations to everybody. Primarily, everyone here is a school psychologist. Is there any offs that could be aware of, and we can talk specifically?
I'm a school psychologist, but program specialist coordinator now.
Okay, all right. So yeah, I think you'll see very important stuff for us. So let me kind of discuss a little bit about what we went through, and we'll kind of talk about our system. So 10:51 is on this October. This is Sunday night when this began happening. This is the first NICSL alert that came out. NICSL, if you guys don't know, is like a county-wide Office of Emergency Services, and that first report comes out on Sunday night. Multiple fires have erupted in Sonoma County. Fires have spread, something called the Mark Wing Express in Reevely Road area. Shiloh and County River Road. Local firemen are on scene. So that night was just an extremely windy night. I learned later when we spoke to fire people that there was a very big concern all night that something could happen. And so they were on a heightened alert as winds, there's a certain formula of temperature and humidity dropping and winds, and that kind of sets everyone off on alert. So, we were real concerned about that to begin with. And there's some small fires that begin happening over in that what we call Calistoga area, northern part of the Napa Valley. At 12:30 a.m., our superintendent begins to receive the first calls that these are now potentially affecting us. I'm the first one, sorry guys. She finds out at 10:30 that 2 board members of our school district are in the middle of evacuating their homes. And so this starts to become a reality. For myself personally, it was a very windy night. I woke up at about 11:30, and I had some tarps that were flopping out, had to go take care of those, couldn't get back to sleep, turn on the news, and I'm starting to follow the news, and so we're beginning to text our superintendent. I was beginning to text it between 10:30 and 12, this looks like it's getting big. 122, our superintendent, so at this point she lives over in Lodi, and she's getting in her car, and we're really beginning to think these things are happening. She's in touch with the Office of Emergency Evacuations. She knows that they're beginning to evacuate. By this time, 122, the fires are in full flames, and emergency services communicated to her. The rest of us didn't know this yet, but they communicated to her, this is going to be serious, this is going to be a school-wide fire. So she gets in her car and she starts to begin driving into the fire. At this time, then we get another Nixle update. Mass evacuations are taking place. If you're in this area, you need to move out. So now we were at 2 o'clock, and everyone begins to understand this is getting big. And we'll talk in our presentation. There are some people here that were affected and lost homes. Those stories. We are in the middle of this happening. We're on the phones with each other. We're calling our principals at one of our high schools. We're developing our evacuation center beginning at 2 in the morning. No contact with Red Cross, no contact with emergency services. We knew that one of our high schools was furthest away from this, Elsie Allen High School. We called the principal, we called the custodian, and we said, get to the schools and start opening it up. This one says, then part of the fire jumped across Highway 101 and entered an area called Coffee Park. And so then there's a Nixle that you now need to get out of that. So all of a sudden, what was just coming over the hill from Calistoga has now jumped into a major section, a highly densely populated part of Santa Rosa. At 4 a.m. myself, I'm with my family and I'm up all night and I haven't really told them anything. Told my wife that, okay, we got to go because we're getting our cabinet together at the district office to try to find out what's going on. And so I'm in my car, and on my way to work, I'm about 15 minutes out. This is me watching traffic come through, and that's Coffee Park that's burning a block away. So this is about 4 o'clock in the morning. And it turned out I could not get to my district office because the traffic's so bad, everyone's leaving. I mean, I was like, wow, it's great going in, no traffic, no one on the road. All of a sudden, everyone's evacuating, and the roads are completely packed, and we could barely move. So I attempted, and I had to go back and get back out, and I wasn't able to get in until about 8 o'clock. So by 8 o'clock, obviously daylight happens, our teams are beginning to create our evacuation centers, and that just means us and our custodians opening the gym. I mean, that's literally what it is. Anyone could start coming in. We had teachers start coming in. We as a kind of an organization start talking about what are we going to do to get these people going. Our cook, our CNS person starts developing and moving portable kitchens. And we in the middle of the night, we said, okay, we're going to do evacuation center. And again, this is without Red Cross, anybody. There's no one communicating. They're still working on the fires. No one has put the stuff together. We just created an evacuation center because people were beginning to come to us. And we just kind of rolled with it. Our cabinet gets together at 10 o'clock. We start developing the logistics of what's going on, who's where, who's available, who's not. We start kind of coordinating with our principals and start beginning to find out who's affected by the fire, where people are. This is a later. Comes through.
Driving or helicopter?
It's a helicopter, police helicopter later showed video of what they're coming into.
Steve, do you remember what neighborhood this is?
We're coming up to Coffee Park right here. That's the 101 right there. I think that's Kmart.
Yeah.
And then we passed over there.
Burned down Kmart, And then Coffee Park subdivision, and it wiped out the whole subdivision. Pretty much.
So, as we start developing now, we're on Monday morning, and we're developing this, obviously, and they evacuated nursing homes without telling us, and brought these nursing clients to our schools. And, okay, what are we doing? So, we're logistically in our office reacting to a lot of this, and I'm calling my school nurse staff, we're calling anyone available. People here are beginning to show up. What was amazing, one of the things we developed is another of our middle school, we just did our own evacuation center, and we brought in people, we brought in our food, we have a mobile kitchen truck that we developed, and we brought that in, and we just begin to develop meals. And by this time, this is 10, 12 o'clock the next day, what we had already begun is, one of the logistic things that we're doing is people were calling us, what can I do? I'm not affected, my house isn't burning, how can I help? And so one of the wonderful things we did, if you guys don't know the magic of Google Docs in your district yet, I simply created a logistics of who can cover AM, PM shifts at LC Allen and Cook, and who can do this. And we had teachers.
School psychologists. Wow.
An amazing turnout. Everybody that just, what can I do? I'm here, I'm not burned, I want to help, and amazing times. However, the devastation, as you've seen pictures, this is the one school that did burn down. It's what we call a satellite, just a smaller version of Hidden Valley School where Matt works and Bree. So that was the entire school that got actually wiped out.
There were other schools in the county that were gone as well, but outside of our school district, there were smaller school districts right outside of color.
And so we don't really begin to see these images because everything's blocked off, and these are things that start coming afterwards to us. And so you don't know because everyone's evacuated, police have blocked off, and so you don't really see that kind of damage. And these are obviously pictures that come out later. So that's the aerial view of what you guys saw burning a moment ago. And and this is important in the trauma recovery because, why does one family get spared and one house gets spared? It's that randomness that also impacts a lot of people. And that's one of the recovery things that we've kind of learned about. It's important to follow.
And what is it like if you live in one of those houses that didn't burn and you're coming home every day and across the street? This is what you're saying.
A school psych intern who lived in one of those houses that was a couple of slides ago that was still there. So she thought, she lost her house that night. A couple days later found out that it was still there, but it's right across from, wasn't one intern, but her family's too traumatized that they're moving back home to Southern California.
I live 3 blocks from Coffee Park, so we thought my house was gone too.
And this is an area called Fountain Grove, kind of a hill that rises above us, and that's where the fires came through. And it's near the school that you saw burned down, and it's a very affluent part of the town, and it really spoke to just Santa Rosa because the Coffee Park area is much more middle class, and then Fountain Grove, and everybody losing their homes really did a lot to say, look, this is the entire population of Santa Rosa. Very, very impactful.
200 doctors from Kaiser lost their homes that lived up in that subdivision in Fountain Grove.
So in our district, thank you, Angela, it's perfect. In our district, this is what we had. 80 staff members have lost. We take counts later when we start doing the recovery. We'll talk about that. We've got 800 students that has homes that have been destroyed. The ripple that's also important and this is the total devastation. You guys are probably well aware of. The ripple that becomes important for the recovery and how we have to develop a system is the displacement. So in that same time, and these guys will all tell you they were evacuated. So you've got evacuations, and you can't really get yourself together because nope, I gotta go. So we had principals coming in and ready to get my school going. All of a sudden, fires kept going a week. 10 days later, gotta go, gotta pack my stuff and go down to the KOA in Petaluma and live there for 3 or 4 days until my home gets settled. You know, and so while you're beginning to plan this, people are just packing up and going, and it's really a continuous process. But the displacement factor is another big thing. So that we're wrestling with not just the ones that destroyed their homes, and now they get displaced. We'll talk about that later. Secondary displacements, rentals. Now they pull the lease on the rental, so the original family can live there. So now you have renters that are out, and we're starting feeling that in about December and January. So we have this whole second wave of people with far less means to control themselves and control where they go. And so it's not just in October and November and people get in hotels and motels and settle in. Then there's this whole other wave that happened. And now we're in another wave, which is the rebuilding phase and the insurance phase. And now we're wrestling with people that are saying, that doesn't cover the cost of me rebuilding my house. Now it's time for another decision. So we'll talk about those kind of pieces as we develop. So as we develop in our presentation, student support services are a key to what we think is a recognizable piece that you can create in your district. How to create a service model where whatever crisis we have, and we hope you don't have, of course, a fire crisis, but as we all know, every district goes through its trauma, whether it's earthquake, whether it's fire, whether it's an explosion, whether it's death of staff members or students. I think some of the things that we're going to talk about here are ways that you can keep your system informed, trauma-informed, to react and adjust. And while we had to do this on a macro, massive scale, there's some microness that you all can work about just at your own school, if that's your world, if you're part of the district world, how you can create that at the district. And so as we go through our presentation, everyone does their components. That's kind of the piece that we're looking for is how can you take what we did at a macro scale and how could you make that either at your school where you have a lot of influence or at a district if you're in more of a district position. We're all comfortable as we present to please ask a question in immediacy if you need to. It'll be important for us. So I want to just tell you if you're not already aware, you all probably are, Matthew, you're all pretty understand. I'm sure you all know your multi-tiered systems of support, the triangle you guys all see here. So it's something we've been working with for a couple of years. We have a grant, you guys probably know what PBIS is, right, multi-tier systems. So we've been building for a couple of years already what these tiers look like for us. The academic triangle, we call it student and family engagement, which can be things like attendance and those things, and then the other triangle we call wellness and behavior triangles. So we've had a number of initiatives that we've been doing and some grants through BEST. BEST is a model under PBIS, you guys may be aware of that. So we've been working on a couple of things in a number of areas. And so what the presenters coming up will talk about their pieces of these multi-tiered systems. As our school psychologists will talk about that. It'll be a system you're pretty well familiar with. Bree is going to talk about a program that we brought in under the student wellness model called BEST and PBIS. It's one of these grants that we had. And it's called restorative practices. If you're not aware of those in your district, you probably heard about some of those. So we've got really deep into that, and for us, that's a strong component. And the way we're going to say this brings it all together is we all have these little components that we were working on before the fires happened, and that's what we were able to tap into, we think, to kind of work on our recovery. So with that, I'll turn it over to the details for Matt.
So this is our typical setup for school psychologists in our district. We're a district of about 16,000 kids. I think Santa Rosa High School is the biggest high school between San Francisco and Portland. So it's a large number of kids. So we have, this year we have 13 school psychologists, full-time and free interns. We have a variety of programs in our schools. We've got 2 counseling and education programs. So those are small, self-contained programs for emotionally disturbed kids where there's a counselor in there full-time, as well as support from a school psychologist who goes in for group counseling. There's 2 aides in the classroom, and it's 12 kids or less. Not all kids are emotionally disturbed, but they have an emotional behavioral component. So the school programs are really designed for kind of those internalizers. We try to kind of weed out the externalizers as much as possible because that can always throw a pretty big wrench in the system. when those kids mix in with those internalizers. We have a couple RISE programs, Reaching Independence Under Structured Education. Those are autism specialized classrooms. Right now we have a middle school and a high school open, and we're opening another middle school, another high school for next year on the other side of town. All sites have RSP programs. Not every site has SDC programs, but we try to have a representation within each neighborhood to provide those SDC type of programs for those kids at their home schools. SH programs, a few across the district. And then at the Hidden Valley Elementary, we also have a regional deaf and hard of hearing program where there's a preschool through kindergarten class, first grade through third grade class, and then a fourth through sixth grade class, where all staff are bilingual in that they're English, but also fluent sign language as well. Sorry. So yeah, that's kind of those are the kind of programs we have around the district at this time and are coming up. You know, as most of you guys probably know, this is probably typical for about 1 per 1,000. One school psychologist per 1,000 students, 1,200 students or so. So we have about 80 to 100 evaluations a year. That's pretty normal for us. Some of those are kind of record review, those high school kids who don't have, you know, might not do full testing every time, especially at the middle school and high school level if it's not necessary. We have ERMS cases, so those counseling cases that we typically do between 5 and 10. And if it's above and beyond that, our district is really wonderful in that they support us by hiring outside agencies to support the kids if we can't get to all of them. We are involved a lot in 504 plans as part of, especially if it's kind of in our wheelhouse. If it's a more medically oriented thing, maybe the nurses would be involved in that. But as school psychologists, we're involved in the evaluations, but also in some of the 504 plans for those ADHD kids and or the kids who might have anxiety, but it's not to the level of special education need. Consultation, collaboration, SST meetings, as most of us do, staff trainings, and lead school psychologist roles of supporting interns, planning for staff for school psychologist trainings. I meet once a week. We meet once a week with our interns to just, they get to come once a week for at least 2 hours just to ask questions. And it's a really good way to support them and get them the support, you know, so they feel comfortable and can go out to their sites, because we kind of give them a heavy load as an intern. We work them hard, but we want to make sure that they don't feel too overwhelmed, because they're all going to be overwhelmed no matter what. School counselors.
I'm staying up there and being my hero pusher.
I'll be your hero pusher.
I am not very good at speaking in front of people, so I'm going to stay behind my table. So school counselors, we operate at about 500 to 1 student to counselor ratio. It can vary from site to site, but that's pretty much the average. At the elementary school level, we're looking at more social emotional skills, social skills groups, more classroom push-in type services. We have a toolbox program that we're really implementing at the elementary school level. And really our school counselors are utilized to look at those kids that are coming up to the office on a regular basis and looking at it as, is it a discipline issue, or is it really a manifestation of something else that's going on that's causing them to be up in the office more often. At the middle school level, where I'm at, academic counseling is a primary focus for us. Scheduling students, getting them into their classes. Also, we are, at my middle school, we're in charge of parent-teacher conferences, student study team meetings. We actually do run our 504 meetings, and then we try to attend any and all IEPs that we can make it to. We do handle some social emotional counseling, but mostly it's on a triage basis, you know, working with a student to find out what's going on in the classroom, or if it's something going on at home or with other students, and then helping them to get back into the classroom, and then, you know, really putting off that more therapy base to other consultants and sometimes our school psychologists. High school counseling is very similar. A lot of the academic counseling, scheduling, parent-teacher conferences, student study team meetings. At the high school level, though, the 504s do go back onto the administrator's plate. So we still attend those meetings, but we're not in charge of them. And again, attend as many IEPs as possible. A huge portion of high school counseling is, of course, the college and career readiness, making sure that they have their A through G requirements, or just that they have their graduation requirements together. So that's pretty much what our school counselors, although we do vary by site to site, like some of us are on our leadership teams, run field trips. I have a program at my school called Safe School Ambassadors. We help run that. So it can vary above and beyond that depending on site. So one of the counseling services that Santa Rosa City Schools has actually contracted with Social Advocates for Youth, which is a community agency that provides mental health services in Sonoma County, and they have provided us with support around those higher level need children. So we have the anxiety, the depression, a lot of self-harm, those type things we can refer to the SAY counselor, and then they are able to do those more consistent meetings, whether it be once a week or every other week as necessary. And then they're also very, very helpful because they can help the families then refer out to outside agencies if they feel like after they've gotten done with they're only allowed to go up to, I think, 8 sessions with a student. So if they feel like that student needs more continual care, then they can help those families and students get set up with that.
And that was really in the last, yeah, go ahead.
Just a couple questions in regards to that. That is through mental health. Are they clinicians or is it, where is that agency from?
So Social Advocates for Youth is a local agency. I think they're based out of Santa Rosa.
Yeah, they're all marriage and family therapists or marriage and family interns,
Okay.
and they are providing services. In the last 5 years, and probably 5 to 10 years, the increase of anxiety present in schools has been really intense, and as to a level where they wouldn't necessarily need special education services, but it was definitely aware, and parents were so concerned. And our current setup at the time, we didn't have enough. I don't think we had enough staff who could really cover all those needs. And so the district found resources to kind of add those needs to the district to support those kids who are kind of in between the just functioning just fine and the needing special education services. And so that's where SAY is able to fill that void. Was able to fill that void.
We don't have them every day. It's not a full-time counseling service. We have them a day here, a day there, and then some sites have written it into their system to actually help pay for an extra day or
Right.
so that we get those services.
And it's a nonprofit agency.
Thank you.
You coming up here?
I guess so. All right, so as Steve mentioned, restorative is part of our Best Plus program. The plus portion is restorative practices. Restorative practices is a movement grounded in principles designed to create meaningful relationships. These relationships are central to building and thriving communities. It focuses on the harm done rather than the broken rule. Restorative practices is a reflective practice that encourages personal responsibility, giving a voice to both the person harmed as well as the person that caused the harm. Restorative practices creates equity of voice, in turn allowing members of the community to bring forward their best selves while feeling heard and valued. So this is actually, we have a class at Elsie Allen High School as well as Cook Middle School that talks about restorative practices. It teaches the kids to communicate and work through their problems and be peer help. And that's them around their puzzle piece that they put together. So why restorative? So in 2013 school year, 2012 to 2013, we got a new superintendent who pulled a bunch of our data and looked at our suspension and expulsion rates and found that at that time we were number 4 in California, even though we were up there with LA County, Oakland, San Francisco. We were number 4, especially disproportionate among Latino, and ethnic youth. So we decided we needed to do something about that, and so we looked at the restorative model and rolling out Best Plus. So restorative is really a paradigm shift. It's retributive versus restorative. So before, where we might have asked what laws or rules have been broken, now we ask who's been hurt or harmed. We might have asked who did it, now we ask what are the needs. What kind of punishment do they deserve, we might have asked before. Now we're asking what obligations do they have to repair the harm. It's relationship based. We're looking for everything through a relational lens, knowing that relationships are central to building community. We also are looking at high expectations and high support, which I'll get to in a minute. It focuses on the harm, not the rule breaking. We've got our Santa Rosa City School thing over it.
Engages.
It engages collaborative problem solving, accountability, responsibility, and empowers change. So I have some cards back there. We have very specific things that we asked. When we go about doing restorative practices, we sit down, we pre-circle with the kids separately. So I might take the victim aside, pre-circle with them. These are the cards. These are our guidelines here. And these are the questions we ask. What happened? What were you thinking at the time? What have you thought about since? Who has been affected by what happened? And also, how were they affected? Then we ask, what about this has been hard for you? And then, what do you think needs to be done to make things right, or as right as possible? Because we realize kids aren't always going to be friends afterwards, so we really look at how can we make agreements to make school a safe place. Our guidelines are pretty specific as well. If the kids, we go over the guidelines in the very beginning of the circle, and the kids have to agree to the guidelines or it stops right there. Because if we can't get them to agree to the guidelines, they're not gonna work through it, and they're not ready. And it may take more pre-circling, or it may be something that goes back to an administrator. So this is social discipline window, and this is that high support, we're trying to do everything with. We're looking at the whole child. Instead of doing to, we all have those teachers who did things to us, and those people who didn't do anything at all, and the people who do things for us. So we're looking at trying to be up in that top window doing with. So we're looking at always making sure that we're doing things with our kids and supporting our kids.
I would just say a really great thing about restorative is they again have that ability to not only do the pre-circle, the circle, but the follow-up part of it is just so fabulous, because that's stuff that, you know, again with 500 students, counselors, administrators just aren't able to do, and it brings that community back into it again. And then I know on our campus, a lot of times after going through a circle with around one particular incident, students will go back to our restorative person and say, okay, I'm having a similar situation, or I'm having this problem now with another student, and I need help with it. So that relationship, I think, is so huge in that.
It gives them a safe person, and one of the things that we deal with a lot is kids not wanting to come to an administrator because they're afraid to get everyone in trouble. They're afraid of being a snitch, or they're afraid of, you know, outing somebody. Whereas when they come to the restorative specialist, it's done in-house. What happens in circle stays in circle. So they're able to be honest and upfront, and in exchange, we keep it in circle. That doesn't mean that I don't communicate with my admins and my counselors. I absolutely do, but it's done in a safe way where the kids can trust us. And then we bridge that often to our administrators and our counselors, and we work closely with them, so that when we have a kid who has maybe had something horrific happen but doesn't want to talk I'll bring my counselor in and I'll say, you know, I really have this person that I trust, would you mind letting me sit with you and explain your story? So,
And as an administrator, oftentimes those kids who are getting in trouble are the kids that you want in school. You don't want them out of school.
Yeah.
So if I can get this resolved in circle, my restorative person lets me know, and I know that that kid is not being suspended, is not falling further behind, and I get them back in school, it's a win-win for all of us.
So all that is background to our system post-fire. So we're telling, so, you know, our MTSS, the clinicians that you heard about from SAY, right? The role of the counselor, how the role of the school psychologist and these other clinicians. So that's a system that we had built about 2 to 3 years before that. Our restorative system, and obviously, you know, you're hearing that it's a way to bring kids together. It's a way for us to talk about healing and the harm that's been done. And so I'm putting that all together because those are factors as we develop our system for what we are going to recover from Santa Rosa. So that's kind of where we are. Now we're 3 weeks into this. We are beginning to talk about reopening our schools. So after the fires, fires are still going on. They're still further down in Napa. Things are still happening. We've got a lot of smoke damage. So now there's things that are happening in our area with the EPAs coming in and talking about all the damage to that. Everyone's screaming about getting schools opened as soon as possible to get kids back to normal. And, you know, there's a lot of pressure on us. And so now we're trying to figure out what that is. So within a week, we are putting plans together of how we're going to get our schools reopened. Literally, you know, we have 23 different school sites, 2 million square feet. We have to replace every air filter. We have to clean every air duct. We have 15 schools. So I'll get that second. So that's kind of a massive thing. That's one of the hats I did not have to wear, right? So that's the facilities. But these are all in coordination. And so, you know, some schools are beginning to open up. And why isn't Santa Rosa the largest school in this area? Why aren't you guys opening up yet? And we took a lot of heat. Oh, sorry, shouldn't go that far. There was a lot of pressure on get us going because, you know, families want to get back to work and all those kind of things, right? So we're developing these sequential plans of when schools that are least damaged, we can get those opened, and we kind of started developing there's going to be a 2-tier system. So some schools we could get done first, some schools we have later. So we're developing kind of a rolling plan. So while the facilities are still doing it, we're timing this out. Imagine, you know, pulling in construction companies and air duct cleaner places. When do you think you could have this open? You know, and they're working 24 hours. We'll work on the weekends to try to get these schools back open. All right, we anticipate it'll be habitable for staff on Wednesday. It'll be habitable for students on Friday, as an example. So then we have to start coordinating that. So for us, one of the strategic points that I want everyone to walk away with is that we decided to do a slower rollout than anyone else had. We took time, and as we rolled this out, we took time for ourselves to develop our own staff and get ready. And where our adjacent schools took 1 day to get back together, we took 2. And I'll come back to that in a number of ways of what that meant. So what it meant for us is we had to begin to organize the numerics of how we're going to get this together, right? So we already talked about Google Docs and how we've been rolling this out and what administrators are available to begin to work on their schools to come back. What school psychologists, what counselors are available. So literally the principals, we met as a group of principals. We began to focus, say, okay, you know, here's what we're going to do, here's our plan, here's what we think we're going to need your help. Then they're trying to go to their staff, and they're reaching out to their staff. Who's available, who's lost homes, who could come in, can you come in on next Wednesday? Let's try to just talk about the logistics of when we can start getting our families back together. So, what we did is we talked about restoring ourselves. So literally what we did, the model we used is we got together our school psychologists, we got together our SAY clinicians, and anyone else that was available at our level, and this is one of those things called a restorative circle, And we used our skills, we had restorative specialists come with us. So we used our skills to help each other. First time we're getting them back, this is one of the local schools next to us. And it just spent hours going in circles and talking about ourselves and who lost homes and how are you feeling and what that means. And you know, it's, every circle had its own story. We have school psychologists that had lost their home and how they're processing it. We had administrators who were in their own families, like in our own evacuation center. And so we had principals that are telling us, you know, this is the first time I've cried in 3 weeks because I had people, you know, in my house, and they had to be the strong ones. And so, you know, literally, people are breaking down. It was very difficult.
Yeah, it was one of those things where so many of us had to be strong for so long, and it was our first opportunity to really talk about it and feel heard, because we didn't have to be strong. We could come together as a staff for each other, and so these circles at the district office really allowed for that.
And we did it, this group, special ed did their own, and it had their own, such all the school psychologists, and just kind of, you know, the family side of it, and bringing each other that knows everybody and works with everybody. And that was really, I think, one of our keys. We did that with administrators. We came back early and we just shared that experience and just, you know, got that out. Because we knew that when we were going to open schools, we had to be ready, we had to be strong, we had to be cared for. So, one of the people that we did is we tried to find our local resources. And so, County Office of Education came for us, and we were beginning working them during this time. They developed for us presentations on how to survive, how to recover after post-trauma. And so in our slides, which we'll upload, these are the actual presentation slides, where they talked about how to train us on how to recover or train staff. So the model we were doing is we were training trainers. We worked with our staff first on a couple of hours of training, and the County Office of Education and coordinating with our folks, developing what that looks like, talking about it. So there's a whole presentation under here. The idea was that they would then go to their school sites, and when their school sites came back, these 3 or 4 leaders that left the district office would go to their staff, and then they would take 2 days, and they would talk about it, what it means, what it looks like, what we do. And the idea then is the teachers would have some ability to have a similar conversation with the students when they came back. So we're really kind of developing this tiered model to ultimately get to the classroom where you, as the classroom teacher, and your family of 30 kids, you could either choose to do a restorative circle, have some questions and work around, talk about what's going on. It was also a very important point for us to triage student need. And we had places, and we'll talk about that in a moment, where, okay, we have some students that are in real crisis, and how do we prepare for them?
I think it also really empowered the teachers to feel like they had the power to help their students, and it gave them the ability to have some trauma-informed care, which was really important in holding everybody together.
Yeah, so the teachers had tools, and the staff had tools on how to help.
So, one of the things we did is we got you all, agency people, wonderful, reaching out to our community. So, great old Google Doc.
We've had both Ventura and Santa Barbara, because they just went through all their fires, reach out to us, and Mr. Mazzara was able to give them some of our slides and help them with what was going on in that community.
Yeah, and before that, so I was, as a principal on my side, the principal of a middle school in Lake County reached out to me and said, we went through this 1.5 years ago, what can I help you with? So there definitely was this layering of support.
Sorry guys, this ain't gonna work. So, massive Google Doc, every school site, we set up So we had over 120 local people from our marriage, I guess there's a Redwood League of Marriage and Family Counselors. We had some connections in San Francisco. We had people come from Sacramento Valley, down in the peninsula, and they all wanted to do something. So what could they do is they came up and volunteered for recovery time. And so what we planned is we planned both to be available for students and a room available for staff. And so literally Google Docs, sign up for school, sign up for an AM, PM shift. Do you want to work with students or do you want to work with adults? Because as you all know, there are some clinicians that don't really work with school-age population. They're more comfortable with adults. So the plan we did is that we were available for not only the students, but we also had staff available. If a teacher had a hard time, there was a room where they could go and talk to somebody about it. And so we did the same thing, comfort rooms, did the same thing for students, and we had it available for staff as well. And they'll talk about their own school sites here in a moment and how they recovered. But that was the big picture. The overall plan is that we would bring these people in and we support for these couple of days when we came back. And with that, I think we go to Hidden Valley. So Hidden, what? Oh yeah, what did we say about a break? 2:30, 2:45, a little bit more.
Yeah, maybe after my school, we'll take a break if everybody is okay with that. So, I am the lead school psychologist in the district, but also work at Hidden Valley Elementary. I've been a school psychologist for, I think it's my 12th year. And I've worked in a variety of settings, from Southern California to Cleveland, Ohio, to Santa Rosa area. In Santa Rosa, I've worked at many different sites, Santa Rosa High School, but I'm currently working mainly at Hidden Valley Elementary with a little bit of support at the Montgomery Counseling Education Program. So these are my kids. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they both go to Hidden Valley, so I get to be at the school with my kids every day. So I lost my house in the fire, and as kind of Steve went through the timeline, about 1:30, I think there was one of the things he was mentioning, about 1:30 is when we ended up leaving our house. We were seeing the fires throughout the night. From our room, you could see glow over the hills, and then as the night progressed, we saw a fire at the top of the hill, and then an hour later, it'd be halfway down the hill, and that was the point where we decided to get out of town, or get out of the area. We packed up bags, a few things, clothing, the dog, the kids, put them in the car, knocked on a lot of neighbors' doors, just say, this is what we see, we think we should get out of here. So got them moving, and then started calling all the people who weren't right there, but we knew were in our neighborhood to start to get out of the area as well. And some of them were waking up to the phone calls with flames in their front yard. Some of them were saying, we're out of here too. We got down to the bottom of the hill and met with some friends at Safeway parking lot, and just said, what are you guys going to do? They had in-laws, so they were going to their in-laws on the west side of Sonoma County, and we were going to go get a hotel room. So we got to a hotel room, and there was a line of 40 or 50 people down in Roner Park waiting for hotel rooms. This was early. We got out early. We were out plenty of time. My kids saw, I think they may have seen, probably didn't see any flames whatsoever. We put them in the car pretty quickly, but there wasn't the escape in trauma. But as I got back to school, it definitely was kids who escaped in traumatic experiences. So got to hotel room and got rooms, and by 4 o'clock, 4 a.m., we were in our rooms and trying to get the kids to calm down to go to sleep. And then it was the resistance of turning on the news, because that just increases the trauma again for them. We're already kind of freaked out. And it was like being at the hotel room. It was most of them were neighbors, most of the people there. So then it became, for the kids, comfortable, because there was friends' neighborhood. They could run around the halls, and we could put them in a room, and they could watch TV, and then the adults could go check out the news and try to figure out what was going on. So at that time, we did not know what happened to our house. So about 4 o'clock the next day, I realized that my house was gone. Steve showed this picture earlier. So the little red arrow up there, that's where our house was. You can see the park. There's a green patch of ground. That's a park that's a walking distance from our house, and it's green, still green. The grass was perfect. The playground was untouched. But the fire came from this side of it and came down towards us. That's heading south. And this, if you can see the bottom, the pink-looking building, that's a Adobe / stucco house. It totally survived. There's another building up here that survived, but that's the only thing you can see from my house that of houses that actually made it up in that hillside. We escaped after a few days of settling at the hotel and figuring out what we're going to do. We made it down to San Mateo, hung out there for a few days, and let the smoke kind of dissipate, and then got back up to the area, and luckily fell into a VRBO for a couple weeks, and then everyone was really freaking out about housing. So then we're like, there was already a shortage of rentals in Santa Rosa, and the prices were so high, it was really challenging. So through, your insurance agency says, we'll help you find housing, but they're going through your traditional methods of looking up Craigslist, looking up, calling all realtors. We'll see it, but there was no housing available. But through friends, we ended up finding a house which we were able to settle in early November and have been there ever since. We are in the process of rebuilding our house. We're going to be starting hopefully in about a month or two, if everything's working correctly, redesigning the house of our dreams. We were in a position where there's, of course, everyone's had a house, they probably would change this or that. Well, now we get to change everything. And that is part of the restorative piece. That is part of the glimmer of hope through this process for me, is finding those silver linings to certain things. It's not the way I'd wish it upon anybody, but there's the positives. It's kind of have to think that way to move through the day. So Hidden Valley Elementary, there's 543 students there. It's one of the largest, if not the largest, elementary school in the district. A pretty small second language learner population for our city, but definitely part of it. 23 classroom teachers, as I said earlier, a deaf and hard of hearing program, and an RSP program is kind of the services we have available on our site. About a mile up the road, we have what used to be Hewlett Packard, big office space for them, and they've changed over a year to move it from Keysight, and now it's not Keysight, but
Agilent.
Agilent then Keysight. So Agilent and Keysight. So on the property of Keysight, which is now an offshoot of HP, was a little satellite school, and it was kindergarten, TK kindergarten through second grade. Most of those people, it was designed as a kind of a way for the people who from HP Agilent to have a school set up for their kids, because there's a lot of transitional people coming in and working 6 months out of the year, or working for a full school year, but have kind of a community based on them. So that's, I think, how it originally started, but then it became kind of a choice school in our area because it was such a small little school. Just it's like the models of like the K1 site, and then for the whole school district, and a 2-3 for a whole district. So in that model, a lot of people chose to go there. And there was 85 students there, 4 normal classrooms, a library, but they had their own office staff and everything. So those are the kind of what it was before. Today's enrollment, we lost about 3% of our main campus. 110 kids lost their homes at the main campus. Higher percentage of the Hidden Valley satellite kids. So we had 85 before, we're down to 76, so 10% loss of student body. That's what people who moved out of the area and did not return after the fires. And maybe, and some of those were maybe not necessarily losing their homes, but being displaced and not really wanting to go back. And then students lost homes, 25% of those. And then staff, myself, I know one, I can think of, they said 6, and I was trying to think of who the 6 were the other day, and I couldn't put them all together. So like I said, and this is another picture we showed earlier, there's the satellite school. It's on the kind of this little valley just below Agilent, and so it's they just recently finished clearing it off, and it's looking pretty flat now. So then welcome back plan for staff. Steve talked earlier about the 2-day plan instead of the 1-day plan. That 2-day plan, that first day was really a restorative circle. We sat there all morning long, from 8:30 till 12:30, the entire staff going around checking in. Basically, everyone got a chance to say, how are you, or how they're doing, what's been going on with them, what position are they in, did they lose their home, did they not lose their home, did they, their experience. And it was really cathartic. It was cathartic for the people who have been just kind of in limbo for the last couple weeks. It was cathartic for the people who lost homes. It was a really good way to connect to everybody. I thought it was really helpful. And as being the person who's been kind of at home with the kids, not being able to let loose, it was probably one of the first times I felt like I could let loose a little bit with feeling vulnerable and feeling traumatized. And then after that, the afternoon was about logistics. So then after kind of check-in, the afternoon was about how are we going to make this happen? What's our plan? What's our plan moving forward? That's when we started talking about how to present the school with the support that they needed. What was going to be available, what staff was going to be available, and what days were they going to be there. Because our counselors, myself included, we're not there every day. So how can we make sure that we have the right amount of staff available for day one, for day two, for week one, week two. So we presented, this is how we normally were, this is what we had before. I was there 2.5 days a week. The school counselor was 3 days a week. We had SAY, Social Advocates for Youth person 1 day a week, and restorative 2 days a week. So that covers a lot of needs and supports. But how are we going to be able to do that? Because it wasn't just our sites that needed our support. It was the other sites. There's other 2.5 days of the week and the 2 days a week that the school counselor were there, where they needed to be on certain days. So it was logistics that we were working on for all those areas. So the school counseling support on the first day back. So here's what we did. We talked about who was going to be where. We talked about who was going to man the comfort rooms. Those comfort rooms. We had used comfort rooms a lot in prior to that with suicides, with teachers passing. So it wasn't unfamiliar at a school site. And we were talking earlier. It was not just a school site. We're expanding this across the whole district and making sure that was available. So it was how are we going to best support the school on that first day back? And our ideas of supporting whole classrooms. We can't see every kid individually. We can't. It's not, and it wasn't normal. It was much easier, I think, in most situations, to do it as a classroom. These kids were ready to be back in class, ready to get back to some type of normalcy. And so getting into the classrooms and making sure we modeled it so that they could feel like they were back in a school kind of activity, but in a healing way. So what we did was we talked about who was available, and then we talked about, well, how are we going to support the classrooms? And what we did was we went to each teacher and said we're going to offer a kind of restorative circle type of program where we would say I can schedule a time on this first day or second day or third day to come in and sit with your class. And kind of what we did was we broke it up into like the primary elementary, K through 3, or TK through 3, and then upper elementary, the 4, 5, and 6. For the primary, we really focused on art. We thought, these kids are not going to want to talk, be able to explain their experiences, explain what's going on, and plus that would just being able to, making sure everyone got their voices heard. So we focused on art. What we did is we got big sheets of paper and covered desks, full of construction paper, and had them draw. And we had 2 prompts. Our prompts were, what are you worried about? And it wasn't tell us about your fire experience. It was, what are you worried about? And then what are you excited about? So we'd spend about 20 minutes doing those activities for those. And for the upper grades, we would sit in a circle. We did, just like we did with the adults. We would sit with those 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, but same prompt. It wasn't any different. It was the same prompt, but tell us what are you worried about and what are you excited about. So that's once we told the staff what it was. They scheduled times. Most teachers took us up on those kind of offers. Some teachers didn't want it. Some teachers felt like and those teachers. So some of those teachers have the skills. They know it. They feel comfortable. They can handle those kind of situations, and others feel like they need the support. So that's why we didn't say we have to come in. It was up to them if they wanted us to participate. So first day back, everyone tries to come in, and everyone's so happy to be there. It was so cathartic just watching the kids come onto campus. You could feel them connecting again. You could feel them breathing again. Feel them so excited to see their friends. And it wasn't just the kids. I was kind of jumping ahead. It wasn't just connecting to kids who had lost homes. It was connecting to kids who had been stuck at home in a family situation that sucked because parents don't know how to filter the information. They don't know how to shield their kids from the trauma, even though they didn't have that fire trauma. They might have had trauma just from being at home for 3 weeks without the supports of their friends and their normal behaviors, their normal kind of school experience. So it was getting prepped for all that stuff. So the kids come back, everyone's so happy to be there. Everyone goes off to class, and we had all the parents meet in the kind of, as many parents who wanted to, in our kind of multi-purpose room. And then it was talking about what we're going to try to do. We told them about the offering of restorative circles for the classrooms. The teacher principal welcomed everybody back, and the kind of what the plan was, and as counselors went over their plan. And what we decided to do was use one of NASP's very helpful sheets, which it's in the back there, And it went over these things with the parents. How do you deal with trauma, and how do you support your students with trauma, your children with trauma, in a way that's healthy, and what should you be worried about? You know, a lot of parents were, I think, with their own anxieties and their own experiences, having a hard time coming to with how to deal with it, and not overwhelming their kids with information. So, you know, the handout that's over there, remaining calm and reassuring, acknowledging that these are normal feelings to have, emphasizing that children are so resilient. You know, sometimes they're less, some are in situations where they've had a previous trauma, and the resiliency is not quite as strong, but deep down, with the right type of guidance and support, they can be very resilient, and they can move past this. Working on peer support and activities that they would normally get into, get involved in those as soon as you could, and using each other, especially the kind of older kids who are kind of, in my middle school and high school, they use all mostly peer support. But my 6th and 5th graders, they're connected to those friends. They've known each other for so long, and they have that was really important for them to recognize that was part of it. So being able to tell parents it's okay to let your friends get their kids get together with their friends, and making sure that they have that connection still. A big part of it was taking care of their own needs as parents, getting back to some routines for themselves, getting back to whatever it was that helped them deal with stress on a normal basis, and getting back to that so they can get back to a level of stability, whether it's exercise or other activities that they would do. And then being aware of the prolonged signs of stress, and that's the question I've gotten probably most since then, is how long is this, what's normal? What's normal? How long does this go on for it still to be normal? And we've kind of stuck, I've stuck with the 6-month thing, but it also depends on the student, and it also depends on what behaviors are that we're seeing still. So bedwetting and all those things that we're maybe abnormal for a 2nd and 3rd grader with, to do if they're still doing it in 6 months down. We're just now hitting our 6-month thing, and I actually have to say, I think there's not a single kid I can think of who is still, parents are coming to me saying, I think it's still going on. I mean, kids had stuff going into, so there's kids who are a little bit more susceptible to some of the trauma, but I think for the most part we're doing okay in that realm. So make sure you grab a handout. There's also, of course, going on to there's a whole multi-page natural disaster thing on the NASC website. There's also the cheat sheet, which I gave you guys today. So the comfort room was really well used. We had MFTs, we had school psychologists from our local districts, but also some from the Marin County area came up and sat in there. We had art supplies all over the tables, and there was, some days, the first couple days, there was like groups of 5th graders would come in. Sometimes it would be 2 kindergartners coming in together, and it was just, teachers recognizing as the need was there to just get them out of the classroom, because their focus was not. And teachers were not really pushing academics that first day. There was definitely part of routine. They wanted to get back into a routine. And then the restorative classroom stuff, which I talked about a second ago. That continued for the whole first week. I scheduled restorative circles through the first, 3 or 4 days I was on campus, a couple a day. And really the kids, we offered it from the restorative specialist, but also from myself. And from the school counselor. They seemed to want people who they knew. Miss Bree was not, she was assigned to the school, but I don't think you were connected with any of the staff at the school there.
So because a lot of the restorative specialists cover 2 sites, and because of the way we opened, both of my normal, regular sites opened the same day. So we got moved around, so I was with Matt, and I really let the school take the lead in what they wanted me to use as a prompt, because they know their kids. And I felt like Matt's prompts were really helpful, because through the work of the art and what was frightening or what was scary for the kid, we were able to see which kids were, drawing burning buildings. I mean, I worked, I think, with 3 of the satellite classes that had lost their school and their homes. And so those were ones that we could look at and go, okay, we can identify this kid is really struggling right now, especially as little as TK. And then those were kids that could be referred to the comfort room. So it was really helpful. And we did make sure, I did want to say that we did make sure that we ended our prompt with, what are you excited about? So that we left on a positive.
And then we also, I forgot, after kind of a drawing, even with the little kids, we bring them back to a circle. We talked about safety. Mm-hmm. We talked about what keeps you safe. what keeps you safe in your house. You know, we talked about parental support for keeping you safe, and then what keeps you safe at school. Your teachers are there to keep you safe. Your administrators are there to keep you safe. And then we talked about what keeps you safe in the community around you. And so it was really helpful to kind of help. I mean, these kids have been inundated with first responders, and we support, you know, but helping them know that that's about safety. Here, yes, we want to support. I mean, we definitely thank you to first responders, but to a kid, what the hell does that mean? It really meant safety. And so we really every single classroom I went to, I always ended on safety in those three areas and all aspects of their life, that they knew that they had people around them keeping them safe.
Kids were also given stuffed animals, right?
Right. So then there was as part of this process, there was a lot of supports available. I have a teacher who my daughter had him 2 years ago, and my first experience with him is walking in, and so what I was, as a school psychologist, I'm like, what's your thoughts about education? He's like, well, first these kids need to be socially and emotionally ready to learn. So did I want to ask him, do you want to restore yourself? He's like, nope, I got this. So his model was, he had 4 of his 19 students had lost homes. All kids came back. He started his day with that first day back with a class circle. He got the story from them. What's it been like for the last couple weeks? How have you been affected by fires? Some kids wanted to talk about it. Some kids didn't want to talk about it. A lot of kids also had previous traumas, previous losses of family, having to move, pets lost, just that kind of trauma. So that brought some of it up for them. And then that last question was, how do we support each other? And he does a great job of connecting, making the classroom a community, in their community, and connecting all the kids. He talked about with his class grief waves and he's a second grade teacher, so really putting it into those second grade terms of what that looks like with sadness and anger. He also said people will have a lot of questions, and he said the questions went every which way. It could be very direct about the fire experience. It could be very tangential in their minds. And then how long is this okay to go on for? How long should we expect the feelings of your friend who normally is easy to talk to and is all of a sudden hard to talk to? He also he tried to get back to academics, but it wasn't teaching new skills. It was just routine. It was getting back into the routine of his school day. And he said he did some open-ended art time and open-ended writing time. So journal writing time, whatever you want to write about, art time, whatever you want to do. So getting them to those activities that kind of got them reconnected with the classroom. The next week was follow up with more classroom circles, addressing issues as they came up in the class, and then just getting back into more academic routine as the weeks has gone on. And ongoing, what he said, what he was experiences was definitely kids who are triggered easier. So the trauma is there. I wouldn't say he would think it's so significant that they can't function in the classroom, but he definitely sees them being more reactive than they were before, and more much sadness and anger that pops up, and then kind of rehashing previous traumas that brought those things a little bit further to the surface that weren't there before. So a lot of the big part of the healing process for the district was the supports that we got from the school district, from the community. So first of all, Steve talked about the cleaning, but it wasn't just cleaning the air ducts. I don't think it was just cleaning the air ducts, and Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and filters. It was cleaning the carpets. It was cleaning the walls. It was scrubbing every inch of every classroom and making sure that those kids were going back into a healthy and safe environment. And it was hard for parents. I'm being a parent, but also a school member or a school staff member, knowing my kids needed to be back at school and not knowing exactly why it was hard at first. But once it got explained to me, I was like, well then, hell yeah, I'm glad we're waiting. I'm not rushing into that. So since then, expedited purchase orders. So one thing we had to do was integrate another school into the Hidden Valley School. We lost a whole campus of 4 classrooms. So luckily we had one empty classroom that was a counseling room, but it was a full classroom. So that was an easy fix. And then we had pods of classrooms. So it's a building with classrooms all around the outside, and there's an empty space in the middle, usually used for tutoring and for extra help from parents, where parents pull kids out of classrooms and help out. We turn those into classrooms. So we have these new ways of kids getting in and out of the classrooms. They can't use the common area anymore because they've got dividers up. And so there's classrooms in the middle of the buildings for now. Next year we should have temporary buildings put back on our campus for those kids to have their own classrooms. So that's how we got all those kids back onto our campus, the other 85 kids added to our campus. So expedited purchase order, getting them the materials they needed. We provided, so the district has provided some counseling parent evenings to kind of help support parents after school hours about what things they could do to help themselves, but also help their kids. There's also been supports through like kind of Facebook, just things that pop up in their community. There's all these free services available for kids who have been experienced trauma through the fires, and so linking parents through that. And then we have a pasta feed every year, and it was happened to be right around typically right around the fires, and we had our superintendent, we had parents providing that. So it wasn't normally it's just parents and the PTO doing it, but this year they got to let the PTO step away and let all the administrators at the school district level come in to feed the kids and feed their parents and getting all set up and cleaning up for that. Community supports, so we had Luther Burbank Centers, which is one of the big kind of performing arts centers in Santa Rosa. They offered free stuff for kids. We've had a local art supply offering boxes upon boxes of free art supplies that are still piled up in the principal's office. So other schools we have a letter on our fridge from a school district down in I think South Bay of just kids, fourth graders writing other fourth graders saying we're thinking about you, and they would send gift cards, and we still get gift cards delivered to the school from other schools and school districts from around the state and actually around the country. Churches from the East Coast sending us stuff into the schools, which it's been amazing. And then other donations from the community that showed up. So here's a couple. So Mr. Drake's the guy on the left, and he in his wonderfulness, he set up a donation center. We had a local real estate agent donate open space in our downtown area where it was basically a community hangout, and it was actually one of the best places to kind of start to get back to connecting with everybody. So it was open the week after the fires, and it was by the end it was an entire, probably twice the size of this, tables like these piled with clothing that's been donated, some new, some old, shoes, jackets, bedding, bikes, kitchenware donated, and it really, to be honest, I don't know how much stuff got taken because it never really seemed to go away, but just the fact that people were there all the time, helping fold clothes, helping move stuff in, helping stuff take stuff out to other donation areas. We also had the gentleman in the middle, Terry, who's our bus driver, but he's also our kind of handyman around campus, and he was there as soon as the week after the fires. He was already back on campus. Nobody else was allowed on campus. He was there cleaning up everything. It was so windy, there was branches everywhere, so he cleaned up and got that all set up. So I think that was a big part of it, is that we were out of school for so long, is having some kind of community place to meet. We weren't going to be on campus, which is where we normally were meeting. It was finding some other places. So there were small play groups here and there, but this place was the kind of place, the hub of that community that helped us reconnect and feel connected with our schools. I talked about other things. So since then, we've done the pasta feed. We've done family art nights at school 6 o'clock at night, having local art institutes come in and do drawing activity. We've had this Stars for Hope down below, which they came in, we did stars, and now you'll see stars all around the whole city, hanging on different trees and different corners. We've had an ornament exchange on campus afterwards, because everyone who lost their ornaments, we needed to get their ornaments for their Christmas trees back. Counseling support for fire victims, and then evening counseling support for families. We talked about that. So since then, we've increased our SAY counseling on campus. We have another day a week. I still get requests from parents to check in with their kid, and it's really, some of it is fire related, some of it's not, but it's just the overall vigilance of the parents and staff of being a little bit more concerned and being more aware than they were previously. Last bit, one more with just some pictures. So that pasta feed, there's the woman right here. There's our superintendent, so she's taking plates apart to get at the pasta feed. We had first responders there that first day. We've had Snoopy ice rink. We've had ice and reconnects that gets the kids reconnected and on a regular basis, and just our wonderful special education staff in the bottom right corner. And that's the sign we put. That's my house. That was my house. We got a police officer 2 days after the fires, before they let people back. He helped us get through, and we put a sign up, and we're here we go. So that is all mine. Then we're gonna take a break. Bathroom, stretch your legs, and then we'll get back to it.
Okay, we're going to pick up right where we left off. I'm Ed Navarro, principal at Rincon Valley Middle School, Santa Rosa Accelerated Charter. My school was pretty heavily impacted by these fires. The whole area, the Fountain Grove area that we saw the pictures of, that is my district. So those are the homes where my kids live. So I had 126 students lose their home, and 3 staff members. And the fire really, my school was the fire line. So much so that if you look across the street from my school, it's burnt, and my school is right there. And so, as the fire was happening, people were evacuating the area and hanging out in the parking lot of the grocery store down the street and kind of looking at the fire coming, and they would see all of a sudden big plumes of smoke. So people were texting me telling me, your school's on fire, your school's on fire. And it wasn't, it was actually the buildings across the street and the trees across the street that were going up. So there was a moment of time that I thought my school was gone. So it was pretty traumatizing to think that. So as this was happening, I'm trying to notify my student body of what's going on. I'm trying to notify my staff of what I know, and really trying to figure out where everybody is. So and we're evacuated. So I'm trying to do all of this stuff at the dining room table of some friend's house of ours with my laptop, just trying to figure out where do we go now. So I utilize a lot of the email systems and the robocalls just to get information out there, but knowing that my robocalls were going to phones that didn't really exist anymore was hard, but I knew I needed to reach those that I could get that way. So we did what we could to try to communicate as well as we could. So this is my school. So if you're at my school looking over the street, this is the street that runs in front of us. The whole grassland at the forefront all burned. Didn't burn high, it just burned low and slow. But you can see the buildings, all that black smoke is buildings going up. This was a swim center that is gone now. So really the firefighters had, when I got to school, when I was able to get to school on day 3, 4, maybe I was able to get in, and there were firefighters there, and they were telling me, this was the line, we were saving the school. So they were there at my, on the parking lot. Making sure that we were okay. So phase 1, recovery for staff back at school. We did a lot of those things that we talked about earlier. I had met and had circles with the fellow administrators and the superintendent and really kind of figured out, okay, what are we going to do? Because at this point, we didn't know how long it was going to take. And that was the thing that really hit me, is that if there's an earthquake, and that there's going to be an earthquake, and that's going to be the other tragedy that we're dealing with. It's going to happen, and then it's done. So these fires, the fires just kept going on, and we were in day 7, 8, and the fires were still happening. And not only were they happening, but they were moving and switching. So people who thought they were safe, all of a sudden now they were evacuating because the fires were coming back in a different direction. So we were constantly chasing it. So what are we going to do? So we had 2 days before our students came back. So the first day I had a staff meeting. I knew not to schedule my staff meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning because we were all dealing with this. So I scheduled it at 9. I told my staff, come back at 8, meetings at 9, because I knew that they needed to connect. We were all so separate, and not having anybody to talk to about what was going on, knowing that we had staff members who had lost their homes. I wanted them to have an opportunity to come back, reconnect before we actually started with business. So my staff meeting was at 9. I gathered everybody together, and one of the first things that we did was I shared my story, because everybody has a story. I shared my story. I asked them to share their stories, and I didn't want to do a big circle. And the reason I didn't want to do a big circle is I had been in big circles, and couple of them, when we got together as administrators, we would all go to the district, and I needed to know, I needed a plan. I wanted to make a plan. And the first time we had the circle, it was great to hear everybody's story, and it was very cathartic. The second time we got together, I'm like, I've heard stories, I can't take any more stories in. What are we gonna do? What's the plan? And I didn't want to do that to my staff. It had been 3 weeks. They had all heard stories. We had all experienced it. They were coming in saying, what's the plan? So I did small groups. I had them tell their stories in table groups. And then at the end, I opened it up. I said, does anybody want to share what they heard in small stories? And then that way, people who felt they needed to share had an opportunity to do so. But then it didn't take the whole morning so that we could talk, so we could figure out next steps. One of the things that I found useful is I had this video. It was a short animated video, and it was the difference between empathy and sympathy. And it was pretty powerful in a silly, animated kind of way. But what it really did was gave my staff language to talk empathetically to their colleagues as we were sharing our stories. I didn't tell them that at the time. I said, I want you to watch this video so you can show it to your kids so they can figure out how to speak to each other as they're all coming back. Because, you know, one of the things that happened is that everybody in the community experienced this. And everybody had a story, and everybody was traumatized, but in totally different ways. And people who didn't lose their home but were evacuated forever felt like their story didn't matter because your story is way worse than my story, so I can't share my story. But I wanted everybody to understand that we all had stories, and we all get to share our stories, we all get to feel them. So it gave them language on how to address that when someone would say, oh, I lost my house, and you immediately say, oh, sorry, but where do you go from there? So it's like, I wanted to enable them, give them language to fall back on. So I did that for my staff before we shared out. So then they would have the language to speak to each other on what do you know, when your colleague tells you they just lost their home, you want to be able to respond to that in an appropriate way. So I showed that, and then I gave them the opportunity to share and tell their stories, reminding them that everybody's story is important. So we did that for about 30 minutes, and I figured that was an appropriate time for people really to share out. And then I also gave my staff, I said, if you don't want to talk about your story, here's a prompt. If you were a student returning to RVMS after a tragedy, what would you want from the adults on campus? And that way, they were able then, I don't want to tell my story, but I know I can help my kids. How can I help them? So we kind of talked about that, and I had way more staff members than I thought address the prompt rather than to share their story. One, because they were done sharing it, or they couldn't share it. They couldn't do it. It was very emotional to get everybody back, and they just couldn't do it. So then I asked if anybody wanted to share out. I had some teachers who did. They very much wanted to share their story, and it was great. We all got to hear it, and we all got to feel empathetic towards them and cheer them on, because that's what they needed. And then we had to talk about, okay, how are we going to gear up back to school? And one of the most important things as a principal for me was to remind my staff that we were not going to pick up where we left off. Like it was way more important for me to make sure that their mindset wasn't, how do we catch up the last 3 weeks? Like, we're coming in and we got to catch up these last 3 weeks, because it wasn't about that for me. I'm like, I nailed it over and over. So we're not starting back up with catch up. Because what I didn't know then, what I know now, is that even had we started that, it wouldn't have worked. You know, it wasn't like we left off on Friday on page 8, and on Monday we picked up on page 9. Like, it just wasn't like that. Like we spent weeks really going back to where we were before, making sure that kids are okay and ready to learn, and making sure that teachers were okay and ready to teach, so that we could get back into our academics. So at that first staff meeting, I said, that this is not what it's about. We're not going to play the catch-up game right now. And then so our staff meeting talked about what are we going to do now. So
that I kind of broke up my meeting in 3 different parts. So what do we do now, whole school? So this is the plan. Like, I wanted to make sure my teachers knew that there was a plan, that we weren't just going willy-nilly. So we changed the schedule for the first day. So we have an SSRW period. We have 900 kids at my school, so we have double lunches. I have a 7th grade lunch and an 8th grade lunch. And while 7th graders at lunch, 8th graders have SSRW, while 8th graders at lunch, 7th graders. So that's how we flip it. So I knew that coming back, a double lunch wasn't necessarily the best thing, because everybody needed to be together, and we would figure out supervision, but we needed to get everybody together. And I took that 30 minutes and I added it to first period. So we would have an extended first period, because I knew that was where, you know, these stories were going to happen. And I wanted my teachers then at that point to really, if you're going to hold a circle, that's where you hold it. Let's figure out how we're going to take care of our kids at the beginning of the day. Because I didn't want that kid to have to tell their story first period and second period and third period and all the way through the end of the day. I wanted to give them the opportunity to do that at the beginning and then try to come back and have a day of school. So we changed that. We created a comfort room where we had counselors. We have a therapy dog on campus, so the therapy dog was there and just really there for support. And that's when we pulled in all of the resources from around the community. And my school comes from mostly affluent, so I actually had a lot of parents who were qualified to fill in those slots. So I actually had some parents who didn't lose their home, who were like, what can we do to help? Who came back in and worked in our comfort room alongside all of the others. And then I had my counselors there, and we created a space. I didn't really know what it was going to look like at first, but my counselors and my APs did. Like, they had a vision. They knew what they were going to do. So I gave it to them. I'm like, okay, you guys are in charge of the comfort room. And so you walked in, and there were tables with art supplies, if they needed that. We have lots of little alcoves in our library, so we had mental health professionals in each of, so if they needed to pull a kid aside and have some privacy, they could do that. We also had lots of donations come in. So I had a section in the back for donations for kids who had lost everything, and they just needed to come in and say, I lost everything, and we could kind of give them what they needed to get them going. And we had tables with games. We had areas where impromptu groups would form. So we really tried to make sure that there was access, that the kids could access the help they needed in any way they needed to access it. So they did an amazing job with that. And then so I told them how we were going to do the comfort room. I reminded the teachers that it was okay to get emotional, and they did. And during the staff meeting, I had different people present as well. And it's raw. I mean, it's raw now. I mean, it's been 6 months later, it's still raw. So when they would get up to present or talk, you know, we feel it. And I told them it's okay, you know, because they're feeling it too. And so I kind of reassured them of that. And then after first period, I told them to continue to check in with the students, check the pulse of the students, but let's not dive in every period. You know, if you see somebody who needs some help, check in with them, send them to the comfort room, but we're not going to run circles every period for these kids. And then I asked the teachers to check, I did a volunteer check-in at the end of that first day in the library, in the comfort room, so they could come in and let me know what was the pulse out there. What are you feeling? What do we need tomorrow? How do we move forward? And so I told them how this was going to work. So I gave them a plan. I wanted them to walk out of that first staff meeting going, okay, I know what's ahead of us. I don't know what it's going to feel like, but I know what the plan is ahead of us. So at that staff meeting, we did those circles, allowed everyone to share their story. I told them not to compare their story because everyone's story is valuable. And then I gave them some things to do in that class. So they could journal in class. They could I provided prompts for them so that what they could say to their kids as they were going through. I told them they could make class banners to thank the first responders, and our leadership class provided banner paper for that, or they could write letters to first responders. So again, we weren't going back to catch up. We were going back to figure out what we needed to do. And then the rest of the day, I told them to make sure that they were reassuring their students to make sure that they knew that their goal was not to make up the last 3 weeks of instruction, to provide passes to the comfort room. We created lost inventory sheets, so we gave those to all of the kids. So, you know, the damn fire happened on a Sunday. So every one of my kids had taken their PE clothes to wash them. Had it been on a Thursday, we wouldn't have had to replace any PE clothes. But we had to basically replace an entire school's worth of PE clothes because they were all burnt. So, you know, we had slots like what textbooks did you have at home? What PE, you know, your PE clothes. And so we got an inventory that first day of what did you lose. And then that way we were able then to figure out how are we going to resupply this stuff. So it was really important for us to know what it was so that we would know next steps to move forward. And then I told them to check in daily. As you know, this is not going to be over tomorrow. This is going to be an ongoing thing. And then at that staff meeting, we did some trauma-informed instruction. And I'm going to let Robin talk about that.
So, as Mr. Navarro said, we wanted to start that day off not only just checking in with each other, but really letting everybody know kind of, again, our teachers and our staff, they like details, they like plans, they like knowing stuff. The other school counselor, myself, and our SAY counselor kind of took the presentation that the Sonoma County Office of Education had given us on that Wednesday and kind of tweaked it for our staff, and then presented different parts of it. And our SAY counselor took on the self-care piece, because we also realized that our staff members are a bunch of overachievers just like our kids, and that they're the ones that would try and push through rather than taking that time to do the self-care, and not expecting to give any teacher an aha moment. Like we all know you need to take care of yourself. I think that the one example that we always use, put your own mask on the airplane right before you go to help somebody else. So that was a big part of our self-care. Having similar reactions to your students, it is the other school counselor that works with me her very first year. I keep trying to explain to her that this is not a normal school year. This is not something that we have to deal with year in and year out, but that it's kind of, you know, it's been eye-opening for her. And she got up to do a presentation, her part of the presentation, and she got to a portion where she was discussing some students who are undocumented and their families not going to, and now I'm gonna get upset, not going to places to get help because they were told that ICE might come and pick them up. And in talking about it, she got very, very emotional. And it was one of those things that, you know, she probably practiced it 5 or 6 times before she got up there. She didn't think that she was going to get emotional while she talked about it. And then as she was talking about it, it really just hit her again, how upsetting that was. And so it was the perfect example of how we can go and think that we're all doing fine, and then the second that you start talking about it, something triggers that emotion, and you're right there in the moment. And that we also expected to see very similar things with our kids. And again, giving yourself that permission to relax, you know, to go home and do that yoga class, or to take that walk with your family and not always necessarily be focused back on school and what's happening at school. And then the other school counselor and myself tried to focus more on what we, you know, nobody knows how kids are going to come back and react to this. It's a very different thing in that it was, again, citywide, countywide, and so nobody knew what we were going to walk into, but knowing that there were certain things, a variety of responses, guilt, worry, anxiety, possibility of some PTSD, shock, and that there are definitely longer times that we expect to see these things happening, 6 months being, you know, not out of the realm of what's normal. And that there are definitely kids on our campus that are going to have higher risk factors due to things that are already happening outside of school in their life, losses that they've had previously, and that type of stuff. So in our comfort room, which is the next slide,
What's that?
nope. So as Mr. Navarro talked about, we, well, do you want to do your part? And I think comfort rooms is after that.
Okay. So at the staff meeting, once we got together and we did all that we were going to do, it was important that we break bread together. I wanted to really get that community. And I thought, how am I going to make sure that we get to do that? And through the grace of God, there was many organizations that wanted to reach out. And so we had a local faith-based organization who said, what can we do? How can we help? And I didn't know, you know, that's the thing, is you get all these people who want to help and say, what can I do? And I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to open school. I can't figure out how I'm going to then now organize all these donations. So I said, you know, I'd like to, their suggestion was, we want to feed lunch to all of your kids. I thought, how am I going to manage 900 lunches? Like, I can't. And I said, you know, that doesn't work for me, but I'm having my staff come together, and I would love it if you would provide lunch for them. And they were all over it. So they came, they brought in lunch, they set up tables, they served us. They had their students make banners. It was a Jewish school in Marin, Moran Brandeis, who actually came and had students make posters and letters to our teachers, and then came up and actually served the lunch to us. So it was a great way for everybody to break bread together, build community, and it was a good thing to do after our staff meeting, which was really, really heavy, to then say, okay, come and enjoy some food. So we did that. The next slide is not comfort room. Okay.
I got ahead of myself.
So day 2. So this was a teacher work day. So the first day was just staff day. We came together, figure out what the plan is. Day 2 was the teacher work day. So what I told them is that I'd like you to get together in your departments, and I want you to figure out what are you going to cut, because there's no way that we're going to pick up these 3 weeks of instruction. And I know my staff are sticklers when it comes to their curriculum, and I said, I'm giving you this day to figure it out. So get together in your departments, look and see what are you going to cut out of your curriculum, and know that that's okay. I'm giving you permission. You're not going to get to that chapter this year. That's okay. But you decide which chapter you're going to cut so that you're okay with it. And so we did. So I gave them that day, and they worked together and kind of figured out, built a plan on what they were going to cut. What I did that day is I walked around to every teacher on my campus and just asked, what do you need? What do you need? What can I get you? And I'll never forget, it was one of my teachers who lost her house. And I walked into her room and I said, Carol, what do you need? And she looked me straight in the eye and she said, I need people to stop asking me what I need. And I thought, okay, I get it. And I'm like, I'm here, let me know. And I walked out and I went to the next room. And that's when I really, people don't necessarily are not going to deal with this situation the way I would deal with it. So I just have to be respectful of however people are going to deal with it. So that was my check-in day. Day 3, so now students are coming back, and everyone was nervous and excited. It was a really emotionally charged build-up to this day. So what my staff decided they wanted to do is they wanted to welcome my kids back. So on that morning, lining the streets, my staff all made signs all along the front, all the front of the school, along the roads, and as parents are dropping off their kids, the whole staff was there just to welcome them back. And as parents were dropping kids off, I could see, just tears just rolling down faces as they were dropping off their kids, and knowing that, okay, one, I want to get my kids back in school. Get them back in school. They've been with me for 3 weeks. I'm done. And 2, I can drop my kid off here. It's going to be a safe place. They're ready for them. They're have their open arms out to them. So kids were coming in, and one of the things that we had planned was a station for our parents in our quad. So the kids had the comfort room, and then we had counselors and pastries set up for parents who I thought were going to need some support dropping off kids. Well, as the day progressed, we had 0 parents come to our area, and I attribute that to the fact that they saw that their kids were going to be okay. As they were unloading their kids, they're like, okay, I don't have to worry about this. I can go deal with all the other stuff that I have to deal with, that I haven't been able to deal with because I've had kids, and my kids are going to be okay. So it was a pretty powerful visual image to have the staff there, and they were super excited to do it.
And at the elementary level, we had this coffee that morning, and there was I would say probably half the parents stuck around, because I think for the age group, it was more important. They really wanted to be there and hear what was going on, and feel like there was definitely a plan. So it was definitely, the age group was a huge difference there, for sure.
And then in our comfort room.
I would also say, moving forward, our parents didn't quite know what to expect. So that first day back, they're kind of like in that mode of, okay, it's safe to drop my kids off, and didn't really know or didn't have any concerns that day. But since then, we've definitely had parents that have come and checked in with us more and more. So in the library comfort room, as Mr. Navarro said, in the 9 years that I've been at Rincon, we've lost 3 students and 2 staff members. And our support dog, Gibbs, there, he actually is in our assistant principal's office, which is right next door to the 2 counseling offices. So he's there just as much for students as he is for staff members. But he actually came about after we lost a student, and the grief dogs had come in, and we saw what an impact that they made. And we thought, well, she thought, what if we had that every single day at the school? And so we had our comfort room staffed as we typically do when we've had something happen at school, with some minor differences. Like we said, generally when something happens, somebody passes, you've got maybe that afternoon to plan for it, and the next day you're really hitting it, that with all the emotions at the very beginning. And so it was a little bit different having had some time, although, like for myself, I was evacuated, but every day I was watching the news to see whether or not my house was still there. So for some kids, that first night, if they lost their home, they kind of were processing for 3 weeks. Other students, as the fires went, some of them didn't lose their homes until the 2nd week, or right before we came back and things got under control. So for some of those kids, they processed, and for some of them, they were coming in with fresh, more recent trauma. And then some kids, they were evacuated 2, 3, 4 times. So they didn't lose their home, but as far as that kind of level of trauma, it was very high for them, even though they didn't actually lose their homes. So we did have the big tables set out with the big butcher paper. We also had lots of cutout hearts, so they could hashtag Rincon Strong is a big one that's been around our school. The love is thicker than the smoke in the air, or just writing nice things to first responders, just really positive things. And we have put those hearts and things up around the school and still get to look at them. But I think another really major difference is, besides having school counselors there, school psychologists there, having our support dog, we also had those local mental health professionals that the district office was so instrumental in getting to us. And I have to say the people from San Francisco were just awesome. I mean, they walked in the door and they just sat down at a table and were like, all right, we're here. And the kids just flocked to them. And we were also blessed to have 2 retired RVMS counselors come back over and help out in the comfort room. So we had the big activities, then we had the small tables at the end of the aisles, the little alcoves, and as Mr. Navarro said, our SAY counselor, I think she had throughout the day 2 or 3 impromptu circles that just kind of popped up, and so she kind of ran those. And what was nice was everybody, because there were so many adults, everybody was kind of able to kind of do something that was a little bit more in their wheelhouse. And so people that did better one-on-one would take the kids down, do one-on-one, group discussions, and then some of us, you know, were more focused on, because Mr. Navarro had created an entire Google Doc so we could track who had lost their homes and things, and making sure that we had those students identified, that we had gotten them their feedback sheets. You know, some of those kids, you'd be surprised how many extra backpacks and things that we had left over from the donations, because parents are grabbing the pictures, they're grabbing the mementos. Those kids are grabbing their backpacks and their school books because those are their personal items. And so their history projects. So many kids are like, I lost everything else, but man, I still got my history project. So when you're ready for that, I got it for you. But just making sure that nobody got overlooked. And for some kids, maybe they didn't lose their home, but they spend a lot of time at their grandparents' house, and their grandparents did lose their home. So maybe their PE clothes were over there. So just because you weren't on our list of students who lost your home didn't mean that you didn't lose something and we needed to help them out. And the whole library was set up so that it was like a one-stop shop that they could come to.
And we had students who lost their mom's home, their dad's home, and their parents lost their place of employment. I mean, so it was like multi-levels of loss.
Yeah. So the other comfort rooms that we had, we also had one for our staff members, which we put over in a room that was in the same building as our library. So as people were coming in, or if we felt like we needed more people to go over to the staff room, we could move them over. Our counselor that had just retired last year after 32 years at the middle school came back over and staffed that room because, you know, he's a known person and he's somebody that has worked closely with our staff, and so he was just a really nice fit in there. And of course, because we're adults and also educators, anytime you have coffee and food, we're there. So it wasn't maybe the most utilized room on campus, but it was definitely good that we had it there for those people that did need to go in and use it. It was, I think, invaluable. And as Ed said, the parent one outside of the office, we wanted it someplace visible, so as the parents were dropping their kids off, they saw the coffee, they saw the pastries. And then we had conference rooms available in the office if they needed to come in and have more of a private conversation. But we didn't really have anybody take us up on it that first day. So I think our parent group had provided us with something like 2,400 donut holes, and there was not a donut hole to be seen by the end of the day. So we didn't get as many people into those comfort rooms, the adult comfort rooms, as we had thought. But
12 of them are right here.
but overall, it was a really successful day for our first day back, especially since everybody was just so, I think, hyper vigilant of how it was going to be that first day.
Yeah, so this is just, you know, the sign in front of the school. That was kind of what we were feeling. Is just, we were really excited to have our kids back. We just wanted to make sure that they were okay and really help them through the loss that they had gone through. And then the feeling in the air, I don't know how to describe it, but, you know, the first responders are first responders, and you hear what they are and what they do. But until you experience what they're doing in your community, I mean, it really did. I saw this cartoon and it just really hit me. Like, we got this Santa Rosa PD and all the superheroes saying welcome to the club, because that's what it felt like. Like, they were there and they did what they could, and I'm eternally grateful for them, for what they were able to do for our community despite the loss that existed. And the donation coordination is a full-time job. And I will tell you that if you find yourself in this situation, if there's something that I would do differently, I would find someone and put them in charge of donations. Because donations come from all over, the most random things because people don't know how to help. So I had the National Quilters Guild contact me and say, how many students lost homes? And I said, 126. And they said, well, we're sending you 26 handmade quilts, which is a lovely idea. But I don't have a place for 126 handmade, nor do I have the, like, that was the other thing, is we would collect these things, but getting them to kids, like, I want them to be in school and kind of reacclimate. I don't want to constantly be pulling them out to give them a quilt or whatever. So, like, how do I coordinate this, what they're doing? So I would gather all kinds of stuff, and my staff would make piles, and we would do whatever we could, and then we would just, I would send out an email and say, today after school, I'm giving donations. If you're on the list and you want to come, and then they would get their pile of gift cards and quilts and whatever it was that what they could. But it really, like, I'd get rid of everything, and I'd be like, okay. And then 27 more boxes of something would show up, and I'd be like, okay. So I have backpacks that are going to last our school forever. So, because when you think, oh, a school, what am I going to send? I'm going to send backpacks. And so I have lots of backpacks. And the funny thing is, as I mentioned earlier, is that the Lake County principal contacted me. He sent me boxes of backpacks that he had received from their fire a year and a half ago and sent them to me. So I have his old backpacks, my new backpacks, so we're set for backpacks. But donation coordination, really just huge. It's a good problem to have, but it's definitely a problem. What I learned as a principal really was air quality management. I had no idea that was a thing until I brought kids back to school. Because during the fires, we were all wearing masks. That's my daughter and myself. It was super important. You know, you couldn't breathe. The smell was awful. And you just didn't know what was in the air. Like, what am I breathing? So we learned a lot about N95 masks. I know that N95 or N100 is what you want. And they were gone from Sonoma County almost immediately. We couldn't get a hold of them, so they were a hot commodity. If you had an N95, it was a hot commodity. So I learned about that. As soon as we got back into school, people were really concerned about air quality. So I actually had an air quality monitor installed at school. Who did that?
What's it? Not EPA. What's the CalMet?
Yeah, I think it was
EPA.
Yeah.
Air quality
So they
management.
came and they installed this giant robot thing on my campus. They said we need it where it has electrical power to it and won't be, in the way of kids. And I thought, perfect. I have a spot on my roof, like perfect. So we installed it on the roof, and I told all of my parents, we're monitoring air quality. Here's the website so you can check it 24 hours a day. Make sure that we're okay. Rookie move. So what happened is we installed it on the roof. The roof that has 3 weeks of ash lying on it. So anytime the fan would kick in to check the air quality, it would suck up all that ash into the air quality monitor. And so, like, we were checking air quality on all the monitors around, and it was all good, except for my school, which was like in the red every day. So I've got parents freaking out about why are we in school? Why are you still at school? Look at the air quality. And I didn't have an answer. I'm like, I don't know what the answer is. So I called them. They came back. They thought it was a malfunction in the machine. They replaced that part. Went away. The next day it was just as bad. I called them. I'm like, no, it's not. There's an issue because the air monitor 2 blocks away is showing green, and I'm red. So they figured out what it was. I think the fan kicked on while he was on the roof and saw it. He was like, oh, this is bad. So we took it off the roof, we moved it, and then our air quality was much better. So I needed to make sure that my PE classes, we were in the safe range, and I needed to inform my school community what it was because they were asking. And what we found is that there is no regulation on what is safe for schools in regards to air quality. It doesn't exist. So Steve spent lots and lots of hours and created one which the state is now trying to steal from you and use. So every day, this is one of the first things that I would look at. I would pull it up and see what the air quality was. I would point, send it out to parents. Say, this is where we are today. I had students bring in notes from doctors saying my kid cannot do PE if the particles in the air are this. I'm checking particles every day to make sure that the kid can do PE and check particle quantities. So many of you have probably never even seen this website. I looked at it multiple times every day for months. I haven't looked at it recently. And so now as we come around, we are kind of beyond the fire, but there's trauma that still exists for the kids. And when I think about that first day when we all came back, that was the beauty of that day, is that everybody was on the same page. We had all experienced some kind of trauma, and everyone was excited just to kind of get back to what we knew. And the energy on that day was not really what I expected. There were some kids who were upset, but most kids were just happy to be back at school. And the smiles that I saw on that day, just reconnecting, finding out that your friend was okay. It was kind of a joyous day in a macabre kind of way. But since then, there's been that growing gap. So if you lost your home or you've been evacuated for 3 weeks, you were both in trauma. And then those who were evacuated but still had a home to go back to, their lives started getting more and more normal. And so these kids whose life is still not normal, then all of a sudden they felt, the pull away. Those kids are getting better, and my life still sucks. And then we had the holidays. So that was our big push, was to make sure that our kids were okay for the holidays. So there were organizations, parent clubs out there who were organizing adoptive families for Thanksgiving, so that families would have a place to go for Thanksgiving dinner if they didn't have a place to go. We had holiday hearts, so families could adopt different families and provide what they need. And I felt like we did a really good job of making sure our families were okay for the holidays. And then the holidays were over, and that was the other thing, is when the holidays were over, it was the end of the first semester, and everyone was like, okay, we just got to get through the first semester. We just got to get through it. Like, what are we going to do? We get through the first semester. And then we got through it, and it felt like a false finish line. Like, okay, we've done that. Holidays are over. First semester's over, and no one's better. It was like, the first day back, I'm like, okay, this doesn't feel any better than it did before the holidays. So at that point, I have a teacher on my staff who also lost her home to fire when she was 12 in a fire down in Southern California. So she had a very similar experience with these kids. She could relate with them. So she and another one of my counselors decided to form a fire club because she was a member of a fire club when she was 12. And she jokes that they named themselves the Crispy Critters.
Oh my
That was the name of their club. So she's wanted to know if she could start a club here. So we did. So we've started a fire club. And so this is a club for kids who have lost their homes. And they're meeting monthly. They share their stories. And mostly it's good. But again, just an example of that separation. At this last meeting, there was a student who shared that the foundation of their new home is going to be poured in March, and she was super excited. There was lots of excited cheers, but there were also groans of, "Oh, look at you're getting your house back, and we're still in a hotel." I mean, I saw students who are living in hotels, like they're just not there yet, and they're seeing everybody else starting to move forward. So one of the things that I think is really cool is we also are having another faith group that is providing lunch for the Crispy Critters or the Fire Club, and Santa Rosa PD FD are going to come and serve lunch to these kids and then stay for any questions that they have. So they have a lot of questions. Number one is, why my house? I'm sure, and so they want those answers. So we're going to give them an opportunity to talk to Santa Rosa Fire Department and get their answers, the questions that they have answered. and help them to move forward. We don't have, it's not 100% participation. You know, there's still middle schoolers, and some of them don't want to go to a club at lunch about fire. But we have it where it's available for them. So if it's something that they want to do. And so Sonoma County Schools keep an eye on students' behaviors after the wildfires. So this was an article that was written for our Press Democrat, our local paper, and really just making sure, finding out what we're doing to make sure that we're still taking care of our kids. And you know, it's kind of the number one on the forefront of why I get up every morning is to take care of our kids. And it's, you know, there are lots of stories, but one that I remember, because academically, our kids, you know, it's hard. I've got kids who were academic superstars before the fire and have come back and continue to be academic superstars. I've got other kids who just are not coming back, and it was a discussion that I had to have with my teachers when they were, you know, it was the end of the first semester, and they're thinking, you know, how do I give this kid a passing grade? They haven't turned in a homework assignment since October. And I said, well, what was their grade before the fire? And then, well, they had an A, and now they have an F. And I'm like, well, you can't really flunk a kid because their house burnt down and they're dealing with post-traumatic stress. So what do we do? So those were conversations that we had to have. I'm like, you know, I can't tell you what grade to give them. You know, the teacher has the option to give whatever grade they want to give. But I want you to think about it compassionately and think about what are you going to do. So we've had those conversations, and then I had one student in particular who is not coming back to school, just can't get up and get to school. And so I was in my office with her parents, and as they're telling me, like, what do we do? We're trying to figure it out. And Dad is sitting there with Mom, and he's telling me, and as he's telling me, I can see the wheels spinning in his head. And he's like, we've got 5 more years, because she's an 8th grader, we've got 5 more years before she goes away to college. And it's going to take us 3 to 4 years to build our house. I don't know that I want out of the last 5 years of my kid's childhood to be living like this and rebuilding our house. He's like, and I could just see him, and he looked at his wife, and he's all, we have to move. And like right there, like the reality of this isn't going to work. We can't do this. And they have to move. So they have subsequently left the area. And hopefully they're able to put their lives back together. But the daughter was struggling. So those are the kinds of stories that happen every day as we're trying to move on. And days are mostly normal, but just about every day there's a story like that. So that's Rincon Valley Middle School and Santa Rosa Accelerated Charter.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You guys have any questions? No. So, I am at a, let's see, which one?
Just arrow.
Right here?
Right arrow.
This one? Ah, there we go. So, I'm at a high school, and pretty much because of the leadership of our district, we kind of blueprinted all our middle schools and our high schools and our elementary schools. Our principals carried down, so we have the calming rooms and counselors and stuff like that. So we kind of all did about the same. We rolled out into phase 1, phase 2, and then phase 3 is when the students came in. So our high school has about 1,344 students, 58 teachers. We have advanced placement classes, different programs. We have 1 autism high school class, 3 STC classes, 6 RSP classes, counselors, part-time SAY counselor, full-time restorative justice counselor, CAPE counselor, which is a social worker through our county, and then myself, full-time school psychologist. So same thing, our maintenance crews worked around the clock. Our high school was on the end of Coffey Park, so the big subdivision. Our high school was, thankfully there was railroad tracks, or because of storm,
was so big with the winds and everything and the heat that it would just kept on going. But it did stop finally and kind of died down. So our high school didn't burn, but there was ash and soot and pieces of books of paper all over the place on our campus. So phase one, we did planned without students. We did a big lunch for our staff. Our superintendent came by and spoke to our staff. There was therapists on site to talk with our staff and restorative circles for our staff. That's my husband at 7:30 in the morning from Coffee Park, and we live, 20 miles away from, 15 miles away from Coffee Park? I don't know what Montgomery Village is, but it looks like it was right in our backyard, but it was just so smoky up there. That was pretty crazy. So on phase two, we were again without students, so that the teachers had time to talk about the curriculum, as Laura said, and talk about how they were going to plan, how they were going to teach, what they were going to teach, that sort of stuff. And also, we did some training for the teachers to look at what trauma behaviors look like in the classroom. So with the high schoolers, poor attendance, destructive behavior, so accident prone, that sort of stuff in their grades. So what to look for, how do they do wellness within their classrooms. And then day three, one of the biggest things, at least at our high school, was that the media showed up. So we had 3 media vans, and we had the radio people there and the newspaper people there. We had our board members there, and so it was really kind of chaotic in front of the high school. So luckily our principal pre-warned us and told us this might happen. So pretty much we all stayed away, and he handled all the media, which was really nice. We did have reporters come on our campus, but we had calming rooms, we had restorative rooms, we had a separate room for those students that specifically lost their homes. And we did have some students access those, and some staff members access those. So we had, 6 staff members that lost their home and 77 students that lost their home. But really, it was really the staff that seemed like they needed more of the help. The kids just went right into their classes. They had their social media. They had each other, and they didn't need us as much as it seemed like as the elementary school. So this was, I don't know, on day 4, day 5, it was a whole set of mountains that started burning besides the other. So it was another new fire, and then more fire. It just kept coming. I don't know how that happened, but it did. So again, same thing. We had MFTs that donated their time, that came in to process and do some therapy. I spent a lot of my time with my administrative staff at the high school, coordinating and making sure families got what they needed, calling families, making sure, seeing if they had a place to stay. A lot of our families that got displaced had to go to other little cities, so now they're commuting. So that's a whole nother stress on families. Let's see, so, right, so, mostly I had staff members and teachers that have little children are the ones that came up to ask me how, what are you doing? How do we handle this? And I would reach out to my colleagues on, what are you doing in the elementary schools to help the little people. And so now we're in the recovery phase. So, we, as the school is progressed, I've seen that our staff seems really stressed, so I reached out to some yoga teachers that I know, some qigong teachers, and they are all really busy in the community. But I did find a yoga teacher, and my principal found some funding. So we thought, well, maybe we'll just start real small, and we'll tell our teachers, we'll just send out an email and say, hey, we have a yoga teacher to do yoga for you guys, free, after school. And we thought that maybe we would get maybe 20 teachers. And so we started off with half the size of like this room, and now we've got a double room that's double this size. And it's packed every single Monday. So, and I don't get to go and I need it, and I'm in IEPs all the time. So, but our teachers are getting it, which is really, really good. So that's pretty cool. They're the ones that are showing a lot of anxiety, really. And then most in the IEPs that I'm in with my families, most of my families, a majority of them that have actually lost their homes or that are living elsewhere are waiting to get through to the summertime, and they're going to move. Just because it's just so expensive. It's kind of, they had a place, and then the next people, to rent, and then those people had to be displaced because the homeowners want to move back there, want their family to move back, and so it's kind of has this bubble right now where I think everybody's sort of maintaining, and they want to stay going to school because it's routine. Sort of stuff. So, all right. Do you guys have any questions at the high school level? Or? Okay.
So we're wrapping up.
Where are we now?
Explain this picture, Bree.
So this was taken, I believe, yesterday. This is the rebuild happening in Coffey Park. There is now one home that has been rebuilt.
Which is pretty fast compared to October, November, December, January.
The one that's pre-built, the foundation was still okay, so they wouldn't have to pour a new foundation.
Yeah.
So they were able to build right on top of their old one. And there are 2 or 3 other houses in that community that are siding on it, that have windows in, that are probably a month or 2 away from actually being able to be inhabited.
I saw a building happening in Fountain Grove.
There's one in Fountain Grove. Yeah, we're breaking ground, I think, on our house in probably 2 months. Once we get our plans submitted to the city, they try to expedite the whole process as much as possible. So we're getting really close to kind of seeing a lot of progress being made, which will feel like really good as a way to deal for that our community for sure.
Well, there's a lot of lots for sale.
Yes, there are.
And a lot of people.
Come with Santa Rosa.
And I think of that family, and I think how exciting it is for them to have their house built. But every day, this is what they're going to come home to, And so it's a blessing and a curse.
Right.
So as we kind of wrap up, I want to kind of view this as what we're hoping you can take back is when you can, your system needs to build a foundation that there's no doubt you will use it in some context. There will be trauma somewhere in your school. Maybe it's just localized at one school, one classroom. But building that foundation of support, those MTSS structures, are something that will not be wasted time in your system. And so for us, that makes sure that your system has partners. If your county office of education is generally there, they usually are the ones that kind of coordinate those resources. You'll have community partners. You want to make sure you're establishing relationships, because when it comes time for a moment where you need, we all talked about having community partners, whether it's faith-based partners or if it's just your people you work with, even your contracted staff. They become important with it, and a flexibility to be with those partners. Flexibility for us included, we lost our gym. So every politician wants to then come out and be a part of this. So there's Jerry Brown and Feinstein and Kamala Harris. We had 5 or 6 town hall meetings that we had to do because we're just a school. Remember, there's county and city and all these kind of things, and we think our world's so important, and there are all these other things. And so we had to go to gyms and have custodians come out and put 1,300 people in the gym so we could be on the news. And I had to coordinate with State Office of Emergency Services coming in, and when these guys come in, there's cavalcades of people, and there's a lot of, and we're trying to get our schools back, you guys. We're trying to do this, So there's multiple layers of healing that the community needs to do, let alone press conferences like you guys all mentioned, and there's a lot going on.
The flexibility for school psychologists, being recognized, we're on timelines, all the time on timelines. So we had 3 weeks off in middle school with timelines stopped.
That's right.
So we had to like come back and are we going to focus on the evaluations we were working on? No. So our administrators were really understanding, and we started putting a blurb in every one of our reports over that time, saying due to the fires, our timeline is out of, whatever. And now we have spots in SACE that say due to fires, this IEP is out of compliance, but da da da. So an understanding that is part of that process is that when you lose that time, that there's got to be flexibility on every level. So and accepting that, and we're so I was I've honed into me from day one timelines, and so now and then we're gonna push those timelines aside and move on and do the thing that's most important in my school.
That being said, we still got our December dinks from the CDE on all IEP deadlines we've missed and things like that. We just requested a waiver of SBAC, so we're going to try to make up those 3 weeks in some other way, but we don't know what's going to happen because no one's been through some of this. So there's a lot of things. Another important thing is the scalability. So you heard about comfort rooms and having people come in and getting resources, and so that's every school, every system can use that at a micro level. And so just to think about, okay, not only when those kids come in, I need a place for the staff. I need a place for the teachers. And so in your own system, bringing counselors from another school that maybe is not impacted to support the counselors that are there. I mean, if you've had deaths and other traumas in your schools, it's multi-layered. The people that are their supporters of students and staff need support as well. So that's a big lesson we hope you take away.
And we did. Steve reached out to CASP, who put something on their website, and then the Region 1, Region 4, Region 3 reps from the associations all reached out to our county and our board with Sonoma School Psychologists Association, and so then we were able to get some volunteers to come in. So that's another resource that's can help.
And the other thing we kind of take out of this is that you will come away from this with a remarkable sense of why you're here and what it is. And I think for us, maybe this is a tipping point of the social emotional well-being of our students. We have been talking in our district about trauma and informed care for a while. And then it really rings true when someone goes through this that we can't teach them, get back to your Maslow. You've got to make sure those needs are met, and it comes in many, many different ways. And so for us, we knew about it and we were playing around with it, but the year before we had cut some mental services because budgets were getting tight, and we have to really make sure those foundations are there. And using strong communication, reaching out for each other at every level, you cannot underestimate the ability of just talking to each other and being there for each other and just those relationships. So altogether, we believe these are kind of key areas to build your system's foundations. Take this back and try to do what you can. Those of you that don't know, but there's certain funds in every district called LCAP money, and LCAP money is supposed to be for students who have certain needs. That's a big chunk that you can use in this way. And so at any point, any one of us will be available. We'll put all this up there with our information. If you want ideas or you have your boss call me and how'd you do this and what you do, we'll break those down. Or your site administrators want to get details from anyone as a school site, call these guys. So whatever you need, I think it's important that we reach out. And that's how we want to help you all. Is there something we can help with, build, and when it comes time, keep numbers and reach out when you can. Any kind of questions, any discussions? At the end of this website, we will, PowerPoint, we'll have a number of these. We'll do this live. We'll put it on the CASP website. Small enough audience here. Obviously, if you want to just give us your email, tonight we'll just drop you this Google Doc and you guys can have everything you need. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for being the troop guys.
Yeah, thanks for hanging in with us.
Okay.